Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted that you're here to join us today for what we believe is going to be an incredibly exciting half-day. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Okay. Good afternoon. Delighted you're all here. My name is Manish Bapna. I'm the acting president of the World Resources Institute. And we have what we believe is going to be an incredibly exciting half day of events around climate and business. I want to start by just taking a minute to tell you a little bit about the World Resources Institute for those of you who may not know us. We are a research institute focused on environment and development. We catalyze, we kind of convene around analysis to catalyze action. So we're about strong analysis, we're about partnerships, and we're ultimately about results on the ground. We are based in Washington, but we have offices in about 8 countries around the world. We have about 200 staff working in 5 broad areas around energy and climate, around ecosystems, around business, around governance, and around cities. And we work actively with governments, with civil society, and with the private sector. And so to some extent, the video you just saw about that ability to convene, to bring people together from different areas, we believe very much in that model, premised upon good analysis to create change on the ground. We've been active in Brazil for over 2 decades, and our current work actually consists of work around climate change, work around transportation in cities, and some early work around forests and agriculture. But importantly, one of the cross-cuts across all of those 3 areas is our engagement with the private sector, with business. And that's what we have here today for this afternoon, is a set of 3 sessions that look at climate and business and the nexus between the two, recognizing that if we're going to solve the climate challenge, we're going to have to work constructively and ambitiously with business to do so. So I just want to take a couple of minutes to help set the context of where we are today. 20 years ago, how many of you were here 20 years ago for the original Earth Summit? Was anyone here at the original? So we got a few people. The world, Francisco, yes. There are those of you who were in Rio, and then there were those of you who were at the Earth Summit in Rio. But the world has changed quite a bit in those 20 years, right? So if we look at many of the environmental issues that the Earth Summit tried to tackle, although often the awareness of those issues has increased, the trend lines for many of those issues has actually gotten worse. If one looks at ecosystems, 2/3 of the ecosystems are in a state of decline. If one looks at water, in the next 2 decades, 1/3 of the population on this planet will live in regions where water demand outstrips water supply by 50%. And of course, then there's climate change. And I think everyone knows the trend lines on that. The IEA just recently announced that CO2 emissions in 2011 increased by 3.2%. So we all recognize that these issues are becoming more challenging. But if one also looks over the last 20 years, there's been another set of pretty profound change, and that's around political and economic power. By 2020, China is going to be the largest economy in the world. India is going to be the 3rd largest. We have this fairly significant shift economically and politically to major emerging economies. But we also see an emerging middle class. The middle class today is 1.8 billion people. In 20 years, it's going to be 4.8 billion people. That's a pretty profound shift. And most of that middle class will take place in the developing world, and a large part of that will be in Asia. What that middle class consumes, who they vote for, what stocks they buy, what they eat, that is largely going to determine the future sustainability of the planet. And that is why these issues of climate and business and how tightly interlinked they are become so real and so relevant to the discussion today. What I'd like to do is actually have a conversation with all of you for just a couple of minutes about where business has come in the last 20 years on climate and sustainability. And so I wanted to just take I want to ask a question to the audience. If you were to look 20 years ago about where we were, where business was on climate or more broadly on sustainability, and where we are today, what's changed? What's changed? I'd like to get a few people to respond to that. Thoughts? Yes, Francisco. Want to say more? Okay, we're going to need some microphones, I think.
Hey. One way that has changed a lot in the last 2 decades is that now everyone can be connected to each other in a way that we could not do in the past, and that has changed the way that a lot of things can happen nowadays, as opposed to 2 decades ago.
Yeah, there's businesses, there's just the connectivity. Other thoughts? Where was business strategy 20 years ago, and how has it changed? Right here?
20 years ago, business did not care about climate change. Now they care, but they emit more.
20 years ago, they did not care, but they do care about it today. So there's clearly an increasing awareness on this.
Hoje também há uma maior conscientização sobre todas essas questões. A economia verde, por exemplo, é um assunto que está sendo tocado em todos os setores da sociedade, por todas as pessoas. Então, está mais em volta da sociedade, toca todo mundo. Então,
so there's much higher degree of consciousness around sustainability and the green economy concepts, not only for businesses, but for all sectors of society being touched by these questions and thinking about these issues.
Okay. Other thoughts about how they've seen the evolution of businesses around sustainability in the last 20 years? Just to give you, WRI has been working on these issues since '92, since the Rio Summit. And what we've seen is a fairly significant progression around business knowledge and proactiveness around sustainability. 20 years ago, we heard about, CSR, corporate social responsibility. We saw businesses looking at sustainability because of risk. They saw real environmental risks. They saw real social risks. And they recognized that they needed to think about these issues and factor them into decisions that they're taking. As the years went by, they began to look at business sustainability or environment and social issues not just as risks, but also recognizing that this could have an impact on their bottom line. They started to recognize that being sustainable could reduce costs. Being more energy efficient could reduce energy costs. And then, I think about 10 years ago, there was a recognition that it isn't just about risk, it isn't just about cost, it could actually be about profit. It could be about new markets. And you had a wide range of companies start to announce ambitious revenue targets on climate-friendly products and services. Think of General Electric and their commitment around eco-imagination 8 years ago. So people began to look at it not just as cost, but as revenue. And I think now we're actually beginning to see some companies recognize that embracing sustainability can be incredibly important for innovation. That thinking about where markets will be tomorrow, how to stay competitive, that being sustainable can be a source of competitiveness. is incredibly important. And so what we've seen over the last 20 years is going from kind of short-term defense, corporate social responsibility or risk, to almost kind of long-term offense. It's about revenue, it's about innovation, it's about new markets. And this is an incredibly important shift because it moves sustainability from something that is to be managed and mitigated to something that could drive future growth. And that gets us much more in the center of the minds of CEOs and of key decision makers within business and within government. And so I think that's been incredibly important. But the other shift we've seen in the last 20 years is that businesses have gone from being kind of behind where policy is made to actually being at the table where policy is being made. And I think that's incredibly important because we, quite frankly, lack the political leadership we need today to get where we need to be on sustainability. And business can play a pretty important role in helping push ambition, push policy to what we ultimately need if we're going to solve the problems that we're all here today to discuss. So with that context, what we've set up for today is a session of 3 panels. The first panel is going to be about next practices. And this is a collaboration we have with a number of partners, and I'm going to introduce the keynote in just one moment. But it's really about how we move from where we are today, about cost and revenue, to really innovation, to the next practices that businesses should be adopting 20 years from now. What are they? Who's adopting them today? And how can they drive competitive advantage from that? The second session is going to focus around clean technology and clean technology policy in particular. Still too often people recognize that there's a real trade-off. If one invests in clean technology to create jobs, to develop manufacturing, to boost competitiveness, that it will come at a very high cost of energy. That to invest in clean energy, there's a high cost associated with that. And we've done, in partnership with a number of research institutes around the world, trying to find where is that not the case. Where are we able to have clean energy and competitive energy prices at the same time? And what has been the enabling policy environment to make that happen? So that's going to be the second session. And the third session is actually going to talk about one of the tools that we've developed over the past 10 years called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. This is a tool that is used to help companies measure their greenhouse gas emissions. 60% of Fortune 500 companies use our tool to do so, and we are now looking at broadening it, extending it beyond just companies, but looking at supply chains, looking at cities, looking at specific sectors like agriculture. And so the third session is going to talk about some of the most recent developments of this tool that we think will be relevant for you. We're going to try to make these sessions incredibly interactive. So I encourage you to ask questions. Feel free to interrupt the speakers. Want to make this a dialogue so we can kind of move this conversation forward. So again, we're delighted to have you here. And I'm going to now introduce the keynote speaker for the first session, Peter Madden, who's the CEO of Forum to the Future and has been our co-collaborator for the Next Practice Collaborative. His background, his expertise is really about imagining the future. It's about innovation. It's about sustainable business. It's about sustainable cities. Prior to the NGO that he currently runs, which has fairly sizable 75 staff looking at these issues, he worked both with the British government and with Christian Aid. And we're absolutely delighted that he's here in Rio with us today to co-facilitate this session. So Peter, let me turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just wait for the slide changer. Right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Peter Madden. I'm Chief Executive at Forum for the Future. We're a not-for-profit, an NGO, and we work with some of the biggest companies, governments, cities in the world on sustainability, strategy, and innovation. And we also do a lot of work on what we call new business models, what WRI call next practice. And it's about how business needs to change the way it operates to make money out of doing the sustainable thing. So since we were both running very similar projects, we thought, why don't we get together and collaborate and work together? So we're very pleased to be working together this afternoon. I thought I'd take a couple of minutes just to give a little bit of context for this session. Now, I was born back in the early 1960s. Anybody in the audience want to have a guess how many people were alive on planet Earth back then when I was born? Can't hear. Shout.
1 billion.
More. 3.5 billion. Perfect. Today, what's the global population? 7 billion. And we expect it to top at what sort of level mid-century? 9.5 billion. So that's the first thought I want you to keep in your head. In a single lifetime, my lifetime, global population going from 3.5 billion to 7 billion to 9.5 billion, tripling in one lifetime. Okay. Next, I want you to all close your eyes for a second and think back to the homes that you left before you came here to Rio. And what was in them? Your fridge with meat and cheese and milk, electronic products everywhere, a car, maybe 2 cars parked outside. We're very lucky. Okay, open your eyes. Now, do a calculation for me. Imagine if every single one of those 9.5 billion people on planet Earth enjoyed the same lifestyle that we do. And why shouldn't they? Every one of them enjoyed the same lifestyle, same environmental footprint as we do. How many planet Earth do you think we need to sustain that? Guess? 3, 4, 5. Yeah, maybe about 4.5. How many have we got? So that essentially is the heart of the sustainability conundrum and why we're here today. Escalating population with escalating desires, because everybody watches television, goes on the internet, everyone wants what everyone else has got, and a finite capacity, a limited capacity of planet Earth to give us the resources or to absorb our pollution and waste. So we have to change what we're doing. And that is a big challenge for business because Manish talked about lots of progress from the last 20 years, but has there been enough progress? Some of you out here will work for businesses, I imagine. How many of you genuinely think you're working for a business that is behaving in a sustainable way, that is a sustainable business, living within those and behaving in those limits of a one-planet world? Anybody? I think there's elements, and good elements, of what businesses are doing, but I don't think we're there yet. So I want to talk a little bit about how we get there. That's the kind of level the scientists say that we need to achieve. So when we go around and we talk to our companies, the companies we work with, it's difficult, and we get these barriers and these responses. First of all, people say, yes, I understand this is important, but it won't be important for years and years to come. People are very focused on short-term pressures and rewards, and all their incentives as business people are very short-term. They say, it's a cost and a burden to my company, and the economy is in a mess at the moment, we can't afford it. And they just see it as a regulatory cost and something they have to bear, not as a source of potential new revenue and growth. And others kind of say, yeah, we get it, but it's something for the public relations department or for corporate philanthropy. Somehow that we can leave sustainability to communications, not to the finance department or the strategy department. They don't make it core to their business. So we get a lot of pushback from a lot of businesses about, they understand the big challenges, but it's not for them, not right now, not for the core of the company. That's the bad news. The good news is that there are companies and examples, and we're going to hear certainly from some more in a minute, but I'm going to choose 3 companies that we work with that are starting to approach some of these issues in different ways. Aviva, who are a big investment company, have found a mechanism, we worked with them, to bring those future challenges into the present and help them make decisions in the present that work for the future. Marks and Spencer's have found a way to demonstrate real, tangible profits from doing sustainability. And Unilever, of course, have really made this agenda much, much more core to their business. So, a minute on each of these. Aviva are a big investment house in the City of London. They manage about £500 billion worth of investment. And we worked with them on a thing called the Sustainable Economy Framework. And this was to say, what will a sustainable economy of the future look like? And therefore, as an investor today, where should they put their investments to guarantee that we reach that economy? Now, they wanted to do it partly because they wanted their own investments not to be at risk and to get the best return, and partly also because they wanted their own investments to help create the kind of sustainable economy of the future that we all want to live in. And it's worked very well for them. They're using it as a mechanism for their investment practice, and the British government has now taken it up, and all the innovation support money from the British government is going through the same filter to say, is this pointing us towards a sustainable economy? So a mechanism to take the future and bring it into the present, into their decision making. A second example, Marks and Spencer's. People know Marks and Spencer's Plan A. They're a UK supermarket, and we worked with them on a sustainability strategy, which is very much a 360-degree strategy for everything that they sell. Their organic cotton in their T-shirts and fair trade clothing. They made a zero-carbon bra, sustainable fish in all their products and so on. And I think a very, very strong strategy, but they launched this strategy in the midst of the recession, in the worst days of the recession in the UK. And investors in the city started to give them a hard time and say, this is the wrong time to do it, this will make your products more expensive, stop. And they had real pressure from their investors. And to their credit, Marks and Spencer said, no, we believe this is the right thing. And we worked with them to measure the tangible benefits of doing this. The first year, they did make big investments, and it cost them about £40 million, investing particularly in energy efficiency and renewable energies. Second year, they broke even, and then year on year, there is tangible extra money to the bottom line that they can point to from having done sustainability, from having done Plan A. The third and final example, Unilever. I'm sure most of you will know Sustainable Living Plan. And I think this is a company that really has embraced sustainability right into the core of the business. Paul Polman has been very clear that it's going to be the heart of what they do. He's made some very bold statements. You can read them here, including halving the environmental footprint of the company over the next 12 years. And I think this is important because it's not just going to change Unilever. Of course, it will change how they work as a company. But I think that Unilever are so big that this will also start to change the context in which we live and in which they work, because the products that they develop and that they sell and they advertise and the behaviours they get their customers to take will change things and make new things desirable. The political lobbying they do for standards and product standards and so on will raise the game in sustainability. So they will help to create future markets in which they are in a position to do better and to sell better. So I think they have this vision where if they make the world a more sustainable place, they can be a more successful company within it. So my final slide, just to say, I think that it is difficult, and at times are difficult economically at the moment, but we can do this, and there are examples out there. We're going to hear more examples of companies doing this in ways that are good for profit and the planet. But in order to get there, we do need more companies taking sustainability into their core business practice and thinking about how do they find new ways of doing business, new ways of making money out of doing things that are sustainable. Thank you very much. And if you want to hear any more about our work or look it up, please come and visit our website or talk to me afterwards. I'm now going to hand you over to the capable hands of Jennifer Morgan. And Jennifer is the director of the Climate Change and Energy Programme at the World Resources Institute, and she's going to be facilitating the next session. Jennifer.
So if I can ask our panelists, come on up. You want to join us? I think maybe I'll sit here and the four of you can sit here. And sure, whatever you would like. So as Manish and Peter both said, I mean, this is really looking about the issues of corporate sustainability, corporate practice, growth, competitiveness. And WRI's Next Practice Collaborative basically takes the premise that because of the factors that Manish mentioned in the beginning, in other words, the growth that's happening both in emissions and population, et cetera, that best practice isn't enough anymore. We know we have a limited amount of time to stay within various thresholds and tipping points for the planet in order to get emissions down, and that best practice, while it is good, it's not enough anymore. We need to be acting with greater scale and greater speed, and so we're working with companies that get that we need to shift to a zero carbon economy by 2050, and who are willing and ready to look at that and then look at what do they need to be doing now in order to get to that place. And we have three companies here who are going to share with you their experiences, their practices, what's working, why they're doing it, how they're doing it. And we're going to hear from each of them 8 to 10 minutes or less, whatever you would like to do, and then open it up for discussion. So I want to start with Kersten Karl-Barth from Siemens. He's the Director of Sustainability at Siemens, 20 years experience at Siemens, worked around the world, worked in a range of different roles in Siemens, and he's going to start to tell us a bit about Siemens' next practice on the product side. So why don't we just start with you, and then we'll introduce each of you as we go along. Kersten.
Yeah, great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the nice invitation, for the possibility to speak here. As Jennifer said, I'm with Siemens right now since 20 years, and this goes pretty in line with what we've heard from the speakers before. So the question is, what did happen in the recent 20 years? And, well, if you're looking at the Rio and Rio Plus 20, you might be of the opinion that it's quite difficult, that there are a lot of hurdles, it's an uphill battle with the negotiators, and people like Jennifer, they are struggling hard to convince the politicians to really to give the right commitment towards the better of this world. From my perspective, and a very pragmatic, business-driven perspective, I just can say, well, don't wait for the politicians. Just look and consider what companies like our companies did do in the recent 20 years. And that's a funny story. When I did start working for Siemens 20 years ago, I was working in the hydropower department, so building turnkey hydropower plants. I was also living in Brazil a couple of years. It was a very nice time, but we have to consider that hydropower was a pure niche business within Siemens. Siemens at this time was famous for nuclear power. Siemens was famous for building huge coal-fired steam power plants, huge steam turbines. So this was something completely different and has nothing to do with the green economy or the Rio Plus 20 or the Rio 92 discussions there. And certainly also the gas turbine business of Siemens was a kind of, well, little animal, not really successful, very small, not a big future. And I was just recalling, when I was sitting there listening to you guys, I was saying, well, what would have happened 20 years ago if I had started or told in the interview, in the first interview with Siemens, before they employed me, if I would have told them something like, well, we are going to have 20 years from now a wind turbine that's higher than the dome of Cologne, that's really high, 6 megawatt, gearless, and of the weight of a jumbo jet, of a 747. Or if I would told them, well, look, 20 years from now, we'll have a combined cycle power plant, a huge gas turbine, also of the weight of a jumbo jet, a monster, a technical monster, in combined cycle mode with an efficiency of 60.75%. I think the probability would have been very, very high that they just had looked at me and said, look, dear friend, this was very interesting. You should better become an author of science fiction literature. But ladies and gentlemen, right now, today, this is reality. It turned to become reality. 20 years ago, it was pure science fiction. It was just something almost nobody could imagine. Now it's working. It's a proven technology, and it's really a highly successful business. And we are in the middle of this business. Siemens is no longer involved in nuclear power plants. The steam business is, I wouldn't say it's dead, but coal-fired power plants are not really famous anymore in the world. The future is wind power, regenerative power, hydropower, photovoltaic. Siemens became a leader, the world leader in offshore wind power. So it's a completely different picture right now. And if you're comparing the Siemens 20 years ago with the Siemens of today, you really can say, and I think it's proven, Jennifer, you know us also pretty well, Siemens is really a different company with a different focus and a different objective with regard to sustainability. That's the very, very positive thing, and me as an engineer, I'm really glad and happy to be at the front line of all this fantastic stuff. So this is, in comparison to Rio and Rio Plus 20, a definitely development towards the right direction. We have heard, I think, from you of the, what the business is doing. Well, obviously, business, we have to make money. There's no excuse and no way out. We are a stock noted company, so we have to make money. We have to be successful. Successful you only can be if you do have really high competitive products. If you have the best of the best, highest efficiency, best reliability of the products, this is when you have success. And the good news is, and this goes very much in line with the idea of sustainability, all what we are doing there, all the new products, is definitely not only helping us as a company to be successful in the market, but it's also helping the environment. And that's a very positive statement as well. Well, why all of this? Why did we develop this kind of things? Why these products are becoming such a nice success story? You can argue, well, it's climate change, and due to the climate change, people are getting another mentality, and they follow this kind of path and say, well, that's good, so we have to do it. I'm not convinced. And even if we are coming to your home country, sometimes it's difficult to talk with the people there about climate change, because it's somehow politically driven. They say, well, there's no climate change at all, stuff like this. Everybody knows it. But what's no doubt about, and I think this was very impressive, Peter, when you were talking about the 9 billion in the future, well, that's a fact. Nobody on earth can neglect this. Resources are getting more and more rare. So we have to be more efficient, more productive if we are using our resources. How the world can survive if we are just thinking, for example, in cities. Every single day, only in Asia, there's a migration of 100,000 individuals from the countryside toward the city. every single day. It's every 2 weeks the population of Munich. It's every 4 weeks the population of Berlin, where you are living. It's every year the population of Tokyo. It's every year almost the population of 2 times Sao Paulo. So every year we win 2 cities of the size of Sao Paulo on Earth. Together with a growing population, well, this is really something what we call megatrends. This is significantly influencing our business. And we are a big fan of megatrends. We are following these ideas since a decade almost. And for this obvious reason that the world is changing. Let apart this climate change discussion, but just looking at the facts. The world is changing. The world we are going to live in 20 years from now, so the Rio plus 40, will be significantly different as well. And the best thing that business also can do is we have to react the right way. We have to undertake the right steps. We have to align our portfolio, our philosophy, and our thinking to be more successful in this. So it's not an altruistic standpoint. It's a business-driven standpoint. I'm fully committed to this. But the good thing is, the good news is, this is completely the right way. And we are hopefully going to be also successful in the future. Thank you.